Welcome to our final educational video about AMRs with Mir. So today we're going to be talking about scaling the fleet of autonomous mobile robots. In this video, we're going to delve into the considerations and the strategies involved in expanding your fleet of AMRs once you already have them. And whether you're planning to increase the number of robots in your operations or exploring ways to enhance your existing fleet, this video will provide you with insights to scale your AMR deployment effectively. All right, Tim, thanks for being here.
Excited to be here.
So first question, what considerations should be taken into account when planning to expand your fleet of AMRs in a facility?
So I think one of the first orders is to plan for modularity. I think you don't want to repeat yourself. So think of things like mission functions that you can test independently, that you can repeat, save yourself time. Flexible applications. So you might use a consistent top module, but you might change the stations to be more complicated. That way you have a little bit more flexibility or resiliency in the system. The other thing too is to plan for traffic. Things are very different when you go from 3 to 30 AMRs. Another one is to develop a playbook. So, pre-made missions, ready-made applications, application-specific checklists, common pitfalls, that kind of thing. And then to also think about further on the integration. So how are you integrating into a larger system? How do you automate things more? The environment. And again, since it's a mobile system, Wi-Fi and upgrades are very important. Another one is to plan for backups, servers, if you need software backups, if you need to have a backup process, things can happen. And when you get to a larger fleet, you're more reliant on it. So how do you quickly react to something? A robust maintenance plan. So for anything dealing with the AMRs and related equipment, carts, shelves, sensors, things like that.
Gotcha. Those are great considerations, but how do you ensure that a seamless integration happens?
Yeah, definitely do small scale testing. So proof of concept. You definitely want to test also during downtime and then test along production. So if you can figure out some way to test alongside production without interrupting production and be able to switch back and forth quickly, that's very, very helpful. Another one is employee training and engagement on the new workflows. So, introducing these new workflows slowly, getting employee input is all very important.
And you touched on it a little bit when you mentioned Wi-Fi before. Are there any other technology upgrades or adjustments that are needed when you're going to scale up the number of AMRs in any environment?
Definitely you want to look at the expansion of maybe smart integration, improving your WMS if you have one, introducing PLCs or sensors for advanced control logic, things like overhead doors. Like we were saying, also Wi-Fi is very important for a mobile system. You should also think of like analytical tools. When you start to get to larger fleets, you need to be able to track things correctly, and it can grow to a large size that might be tough for a single individual. Also tooling for easier management, if it's like monitoring stations, tablets on hand for interacting with the robots, that kind of thing.
So as you're doing all that, no doubt challenges, will arise. So what challenges do companies tend to face when they're going to scale up, and how can they overcome those challenges?
So definitely one of the big ones is small task efficiency. So I like to think of like a NASCAR pit stop or maintenance or things like that. So how can you smooth out the flow for these things? If it's maintenance, you can clean the wheels, you can have a cleaning station. If it's how you interact with the system, instead of clicking through a bunch of menus, maybe you tie it into, like, for example, you're doing a pick list and you have a scanner. If the scanner triggers the mission, that's much easier. Another one is probably robust mission design. If you can't do A, do B instead. Maybe alert a supervisor or a floor manager. Another big one is probably employee engagement as the application goes on, and that the transfer of knowledge is a big one. So, developing like internal standard operating procedures, internal documentation, onboarding. Another really big one is advanced traffic planning and workflow. So I like to think of car traffic. If you need to ingest or increase spacing, if you need to use zones, develop things like roundabouts, directional zones, change speeds, even something as simple as, honking when you're coming through a door, alerting people, right?
Right.
You can also limit robots in specific areas, which is a big one. Maybe there's heavy congestion and you need to make them take turns. Uh, Another really big one is recovery methods. So, if you can make it so that it's a single button to recover, you have standard operating procedure on how to recover, troubleshooting trees, having spare parts on hand, and the replacement training. The other thing too, which is really important, is issue escalation and workflow. So, who do you contact? What's the contact change when you do have issues? Also, off-hour support is a big one.
So are there any like specific performance metrics or key indicators that should be monitored when scaling the fleet, just to ensure the optimal efficiency and productivity?
Yeah, definitely. A big one is probably mission duration and mission failure rate. Uh, when you're looking at metrics, you really want to look at uh, kind of trends. So, do you have a good time period? Basically, are you looking at weekly trends? Are you looking at monthly trends? Do you have specific failure areas or delay areas, maybe heavy traffic? Another really good one is fleet and robot communication time. So you're looking for like Wi-Fi inconsistencies, maybe coverage. And another one too is that's really important is resolution time. So how fast are you reacting to a problem and how long is the delay? So, where do you need to look at? And it's not just important to look at these trends, but it's also important to look for outliers. Maybe you have a single robot performing worse, or you have a single area performing worse.
As we come to the end of this video on scaling fleet of AMRs, we hope that you have gained valuable knowledge on the intricacies of expanding your autonomous robot fleet. Remember, scalability requires careful planning and adaptation to ensure a smooth integration of new robots into your operations. So we appreciate the time that Tim spent with us today, and we thank you as always for being here. And until next time, I'm Sharon Spielman with Machine Design. Stay curious.